You are listening to the Fly the W670 podcast. This is season 2. It's episode number 96, the return of Sammy Sosa. Don't forget to listen, download, review. Most importantly, subscribe to the podcast. Follow us on the socials. Fly the W670 on Twitter. Of course, we're on Instagram. We're also on Facebook. And you can email the show, flythew670 at gmail.com. Crawly, happy Thursday. Not a whole lot happening still. All we're trying to do is figure out who the Cubs are going to break bread with next, I guess.
Yeah, and I think, it gets frustrated when you start seeing some big names go, but there's still plenty of guys left. And you remember the Cubs when it came to whether it was Seiya Suzuki, whether it was Danby Swanson, both of those moves happened later in the offseason. So, it's not a time to really panic right now. But at the meantime, it doesn't make it a lot of fun for fans kind of waiting around.
Yep, a lot of waiting around, that's for sure. But still, things have been pretty slow. It seems like some of these other guys are going to really weigh their options closely. We'll get into all that in a minute, but you had a little investigative reporting, if you will, last night. You got a little something cooking on Twitter, Crawly.
Yeah, you know me. I'm always looking for something Cubs related to do, and I saw that my friend Bruce Miles, former beat writer for the Cubs, was in Schaumburg, not far from my house, to talk about the new book he co-wrote with Jesse Rogers called The Franchise, Chicago Cubs, A Curated History of the North Siders. So, we're in this library and Bruce is talking about the book, and there's a chapter on Sosa and McGuire and the famous home run chase. And while Bruce was talking, he dropped a little nugget that I think all Cub fans need to be aware of. We know the history of Sammy with the Cubs. He comes over with the George Bell trade and becomes one of the most feared sluggers. He hit 60-plus home runs 3 seasons in a row. And Sammy and McGuire's 1998 home run chase revitalized baseball. The sport was dying after the strike in 94. But then on June 3rd, 2003, Sammy's bat shattered in a million pieces and was found to have cork in it. He was suspended for 8 games. After a tough injury-plagued 2004, a disappointing Cubs team failed at the end on the final game of the season. Sammy leaves early. He's not, the team's not happy about it. Sammy says, well, I left in the 7th inning. Camera shows him leaving after the 1st inning. And it was a really bad breakup, so to say, And so Sammy be traded before the 2005 season to Baltimore for Jerry Hairston Jr. and Mike Fontenot. Then in 2005, Sosa, McGuire, and former Cub Rafael Palmeiro are testifying in front of Congress. You remember Rafi waving the finger, and that was just a whole debacle.
Oh yeah, so that's a word for it. Debacle is a word for it.
Sosa has not been to Wrigley Field, Dustin, since leaving the team in 2004. We're talking 20 years ago, almost. And when Tom Ricketts bought the team, ever since then he's been consistently bombarded about questions about when is Sammy going to be welcomed back. Literally every Cubs convention, every Q&A that Mr. Ricketts does, when is Sammy coming back?
Well, and most of the time you're the one asking that question, right?
I've asked it before. I was very early on, and now I may have a different variation this year, so be prepared. But here's where it gets tricky. Ricketts has stated numerous times that Sammy will not be welcomed back until he apologizes for his role in the PED scandal. Now, remember, Sammy told Congress he never took any PEDs. So
never tested positive, Crawly. Never tested
positive. But the issue then becomes is that Sosa made it clear that he's not going to apologize. So, Dustin, that's been the stalemate for the last 13 years. And it's really, truly been a shame. Sammy was not part of the 2014 100-year Wrigley festivities. Wasn't a part of when Ernie passed away, the funeral. He was close with Ernie Banks. Wasn't part of the 2016 run, all that stuff. So it's kind of been sad, but this is where it kind of takes us back to Bruce Miles and his book discussion. As Bruce explained it, there is a way to break the stalemate. Bruce sits on the Cubs Hall of Fame committee. Okay, the Cubs have their own little Hall of Fame. It's underneath the left field bleachers. And the committee is made up of journalists, including Bruce, Carrie Muscat, Fred Mitchell, your teammate, David Haw. They're all on this committee, and also including the voting are members of the Cubs Hall of Fame. We know Billy Williams, Fergie, Andre Dawson, Lee Smith, and some of the newer guys like Mark Grace and Sean Dunston. Okay. Now, what Bruce mentioned is that for the first time ever, Sammy Sosa's name was included on the ballot. So what has to happen is that he is going to have to be, he could potentially be voted into the Cubs Hall of Fame. And if that's the case, then you would have to welcome him back, right?
Well, you would have to, but yeah, I mean, you could get your little, decoder up, I mean, these reporters, these aren't people that necessarily cover the Cubs on a daily basis, right? Does Ricketts want to squash this by having them put him on the ballot, not vote for him, and then it's all over?
Well, I would say that, we'll see what happens. I would say more than anything, I would think that I know for a fact Fergie Jenkins has been against anyone with the PEDs. I know Sandberg and him did not have and Sosa did not have the greatest relationships. So I would say I would worry less about the journalists, because I think the journalists see things in a certain perspective, and more concerned about the other guys that Sammy may have rubbed the wrong way for any number of reasons. You remember that Sammy's boombox was destroyed when he left. We don't know who the mystery batter was. Some people have accused Kerry Wood. Kerry's denied it, but don't know. But here's the thing right now.
Well, what do you think about that? I mean, who do you think it was? Do you think it was Kerry Wood?
It could have been any number of guys. I mean, that was a constant.
That's not what I asked. That's not what I asked.
I don't know. I don't know. It literally
is. You don't know. I mean, I don't know either.
Do I think? Sure. Let's go ahead and let's put Kerry Wood then. Kerry Wood then. I'll put Kerry Wood. But again,
I'm not looking for you to genuflect. I'm asking what you think.
I just remember that Sammy would blast the boombox at very loud levels to piss off a lot of people. So
typically what it used to be, and at that point, I was actually going into the clubhouse as an intern. I was interning at that point, and it used to be the pitcher used to control. That's how it was supposed to be.
The starting pitcher that day.
The pitcher was supposed to control it. And that was like before the game. But after the game, that's when Sammy would get it, the boombox going, and it was the old, this is how we do it. If they won, right? That was the song. It was like cranking. And they didn't just play it once. It was like on a loop over and over and over and over again.
Right. And so right now, man, I don't think Sosa makes it this year, but this is the 40th anniversary of the 1984 team coming up. We know that Sandberg is getting his statue revealed on Statue Row. And I personally think a couple of players from the 80s get inducted from the 84 team. Right now, there's 3 members of the 84 team that are in the Cubs Hall of Fame: Ryan Sandberg, Rick Sutcliffe, and Lee Smith. So I hope and believe that the next 2 inductees will be Jody Davis and Leon Durham. But Dustin, after that,
wow, Leon Durham.
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, overall, right. But I mean, I just, it's just.
You got to love the Bull. He's a good player.
Yeah. Well.
But
the Padres might build a statue to him.
There was a lot that went wrong there. We can definitely break that down. But
I know.
But I would say that I believe that Sammy, I think in the next 2 to 3 years, he gets in. I don't know where you're at on it.
Well, I mean, Crawly, I put him in now. I put him in yesterday. My problem isn't there a flag in right field that says 66 on it?
Not anymore.
It's down.
I don't believe that's still up anymore. They've kind of changed the way that they've configured those flags.
All right. Well, if it was up for a while though, right?
Correct. 66 on the, yeah.
And it was up while he was not welcome back.
Correct.
And if it's up right now, if on opening day when Crawly is there, and maybe Dustin's there, but when Crawly's there for sure, I want you to take a look. And if it's there, then he should be there. I mean, you can't celebrate what an individual. He did it. That's not a team. That's not a team record. He did that. It's an individual. He put the ball out of the park 66 times. If you want to celebrate it, if you want to recognize it in that way, how can you then shun the individual who actually did what you want to celebrate? That doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me.
Now, there's commemorative brick pavers around. You could buy a brick, and say, Dustin Rhodes, #1 Cub fan, blah, blah, blah. Sammy Sosa's name's there in like a section.
Yeah,
And
but somebody
so,
bought that, right? Somebody paid for that.
no. So basically,
There's
like,
a Sammy Sosa section to the.
correct.
So
Correct.
as an example, if I had a brick, it could possibly be in the Sammy Sosa section.
Correct. My family brick is in the Rick Sutcliffe section.
All right.
So
Well,
yeah,
then
there's
again, so it's ridiculous. If then sandblast his name off that section or change it, change it to the Jody Davis section or whatever.
I think that there is
it's asinine in my opinion.
Right. There was a whole generation that became Cub fans because of Sammy Sosa.
Yes.
I can tell you 100% that after the 1989 team, Cubs baseball was awful in the early 90s. Go take a look at some of those teams and where they finished. It was boring. The teams were awful. It was horrible until Sammy came back. Sammy kind of revitalized this team. And I guess the thing that always bothered me is that, when they allowed that Frankenstein's monster, whether you're talking about the boombox, whether you're talking about everything that they did, they allowed it because he was their cash cow. He was their golden goose. Mm-hmm. And as long as he kept making money, they let him do whatever he want. They turned the other way on a whole lot of things.
Yeah, sir. Yep.
Listen,
you are preaching it, Crawly. You are you are not saying anything that I can disagree with and argue with. And I like to disagree and argue.
I will tell you a story. This is one of my favorite stories. And just keep this in mind when you think about ball players and you start getting accusatory and all this stuff here is, Ron Santo used to be roommates with Glenn Becker, second baseman of the 1960s and early 70s Cubs. And of course, we all know Ron Santo was a diabetic, and he was scared to death to tell anybody that he had diabetes. They thought they would kick him off the team. He would lose money on contracts, all those type of things. And so he basically hid it from everybody. Well, one time Glenn Becker, his roommate, says, okay, I'm going to go get something to eat really quick. I'll be back, roomie. And then he went out. He comes back into the room because he forgot something. He opens the bathroom door, and there's Santo injecting himself with insulin. Mm-hmm. Now, the way that Glenn Becker told the story is that when that happened, he said Santo was hitting 305 and I was hitting 231. And I looked at him and said, hey, whatever you're doing there, roomie, give me some of that. So just kind of keep in mind that I'm not saying it's okay. And I'm not trying to do it, but in baseball, everybody is always trying to get that edge. Is it fair? No. All I'm going to say, though, is a lot of Cubs players on those 90s teams, mid to late 90s, early 2000s, a lot of them were doing a lot of things. Now, did all of them get as gigantic as Sosa or Bonds or McGuire? No, but that doesn't mean they weren't doing it. I can tell you that much. So I would be very careful about, some of the hypocrisy that's going on here. And to me, Dustin, when I think of this whole Sosa situation, the biggest mistake the Cubs made was not doing this when Theo was doing the original teardown. Okay. So when all of a sudden Theo came, basically the Cubs were awful. The farm system was crap. They had nothing. And so they tore everything down to the studs, and the Cubs were losing 100 games every year. And that's when CubsCon first stopped getting sold out.
Yep.
And so it was like, you weren't winning on the field. The product sucked. All you were doing was hoping Theo could turn it around. And this was the first time CubsCon was not selling out. And that to me was the mistake. Around 2012, 2013, you bring Sammy back. He can be the center of attention, which Sammy wants to be. He can be the center of attention. And then you just sit there and you look at this and you say, okay, and then you move on. That was your time. But then after they won the World Series or 2015, 2016, you didn't want to distract from the team, right? But you had nothing going on 2011, 12, 13. You could have done it easily then, and this would have all been done. This is now just dragging on, and you have two guys with egos about this, and Tom Ricketts and Sammy Sosa. Both of them need to put it aside and just move on. And again, you don't have to make him an ambassador to the team.
No, one day, just one time, a one-day event, one afternoon.
It would be interesting. I'll tell you that much.
You are listening to episode 96 of season number 2 of the Fly the W670 podcast, the return of Sammy Sosa. Don't forget to listen, download, review, and most importantly, subscribe to the Fly the W podcast. Last time we recorded the podcast, we found out the stunning news of Shohei Ohtani's deferrals on his contract. As we are recording today, they are getting set to officially introduce Ohtani. So Crawly and I will pick up on that next week early on. We were confused exactly how it will all work. If MLB would accept it, if it went against the collective bargaining agreement. Well, in this segment, Crawly interviews Jon Becker, roster resource assistant for FanGraphs, to get a better understanding on how this record-breaking contract went down and how it exactly works.
Joining me now on the Fly the W podcast, I'm glad to have on Jon Becker. He is the roster resource assistant for FanGraphs. Jon, how you doing tonight?
Great. Thanks for having me. Really excited to be here.
Well, as Cub fans, we're just a little disappointed. There was all sorts of rumors. Oh, the Cubs are in on Shohei, and they're one of the finalists. And I think they were second on Vegas odds of where he was going to go. And now that it seems to come down to it, doesn't seem like it was a realistic dream at all.
No, the whole talk the whole time was it's going to be the Dodgers. And then there was some doubt sown that it wasn't going to be the Dodgers, or didn't have to be the Dodgers. But of course it all ended up where everyone thought it would, just maybe in a more circuitous way. Some more teams maybe more strongly considered than we had thought. But I think he ended up where, if you had asked anyone before the season started, during the season, really before we had any real indications during his free agency, I think 95% of people would have said the Dodgers anyway.
Well, here's the thing, though, and okay, he didn't pick the Cubs, he picked the Dodgers, and we're accepting of that. But then all of a sudden, the news comes out about the contract, right? And you're talking 10 years, $700 million. Everyone's like, ooh, and then kind of like ... and some deferred money in that contract. All right, that's not surprising. We'd still pay Jason Hayward like $5 million. But I think when the details of Shohei's contract came out, one, I didn't even know that teams were allowed to do that. Two, I'm just trying to understand the ramifications and wrap my head about it. Now what's the AAV, all of these things that kind of come into it. And that's where I think a lot of our listeners are kind of confused as to A, how this happened, and B, why didn't any other team do this beforehand?
Yeah. So I'll start with the, is it allowed question. It is very explicitly allowed. There's an article in the collective bargaining agreement that explicitly states that there is no limit to how much money can be deferred. There's no limit to how long it can be deferred for. They could have theoretically deferred $68 million a year for 50 years if they had wanted to. There's no limitation whatsoever. What deferring does is that it not only in a practical sense spreads out the cash flow and the payment schedule, in this case to 20 years instead of 10 years, it lowers the present value of the contract. So our whole economy is based on inflation, and we've been hearing a lot about that the last couple of years. What that means in a baseball sense is the value of the contract, when there are deferrals, gets recalculated based on the present value of the dollar. So, if I have $10 right now, I'm going to be able to buy more than I can with $10 in 2043. The same applies to $68 million. $68 million now is going to buy you more than it can buy you in 20 years. So he's still ending up with $700 million. To me, that's indisputable. I still call it a $700 million contract, but the value of that $700 million is a lot lower than it would be if he was getting paid $700 million over 10 years. He's getting paid $700 million over 20, a vast majority of which is years 11 through 20, when the value of the dollar will just have kept going down. So that's where recalculating of the average annual value comes in.
And that's kind of where I get, so is that within the CBT, the collective bargaining agreement, or, where are the numbers that they figure for this? Because the CBT hit on this contract $46 million a year, as opposed to say $70 million.
Yes. Yep. So the collective bargaining agreement, the CBA, says that when contracts are deferred, the rate that is applied is the federal imputed loan interest rate for the October of the season before the contract starts. So in this case, it would be October of 2023. Contract starts in 2024. We look at the October 2023 rate. That rate is 4.43%. So that's how much the value of the dollar increases according to this interest rate over time. And that value is applied in a deprecating sense to Ohtani's contract. So his money is worth less and less each year, 4.43% less each year. So it's times essentially there's division involved, but essentially it's times like 1 minus 4.43% each year. So it's times 96%, times 96%, times 96%, times 96%. And when you multiply by 96% 10 times, that's how you get all the way down to that 46 million for each year.
Now, I keep hearing that this was Ohtani's idea. Now, I mean, I get that. You know what I mean? That Shohei May said, pay me less so you can pay other guys more.
Yeah.
Understand that. But, I mean, was this his agency? Was this the Dodgers who found this loophole? And I mean, that's, I guess, where I'm just like, okay, how did no other team do this before the Dodgers?
So I think there's a few factors. One is that I don't know if there's any player other than Shohei Ohtani who could afford to essentially have this much of his value of the contract taken away. He makes reportedly up to $50 million a year in outside endorsements. There's no other player in the league who's going to come anywhere close to that. So he can say, okay, you'll pay me $68 million 20 years from now, and I'll only make $2 million because I'll make $50 million from all these other endorsements. That's not to say that he wouldn't probably rather have $68 million right now than $68 million in 20 years, but it means a lot less to him knowing that he has those other outside revenue streams that a lot of players just don't get. So I think nobody's done it because maybe nobody thought to. I'm sure every player agent in the industry knows that there are no limits on how much can be deferred, but I don't think it would have crossed anybody's mind until now, until Ohtani presumably asked his agent and asked the union, is this something that I can do? Because I want to give the Dodgers the opportunity to build around me by lowering my CBT hit. I think if you were to flip it, an agent going to a player and saying, hey, would you theoretically be willing to defer 97% of your contract? Probably wouldn't go over that well. It almost had to be suggested by him to not be viewed as an insulting thing to ask of the player.
Well, I mean, like I said, I find that nuts. And so basically the Dodgers are going to be under the first threshold for the luxury tax because of this. They can go out and get Yamamoto or whoever the heck they want, at this point in time. I guess then my question would be, with most of this payment having to be done 2034 to 2043, which again, I know it sounds crazy, but it's like 10 years from now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we don't even know if there's going to be a luxury tax in 10 years. I mean, if that's going to be bargained in, bargained out, but let's say theoretically everything stays as is, that $68 million they're going to be paying him 2034 through 2043 per year would have to count against the luxury tax then, right?
No. So the reason why the value is calculated based on the present value is so that $68 million can be correctly applied only during the contract years. When the Dodgers make those payments, I'm sure that Guggenheim Baseball Partners, who owns the Dodgers, is going to have that on their own ledger for their own financial purposes. But as far as Major League Baseball is concerned, those payments are made for luxury tax calculations only in the next 10 years. So that's why the value of the 70 million is recalculated, because yes, it is paid in 2034, but it's applied to 2023. Yes, it's paid in 2025 or 2035, but it's applied to 2024. And that's why the value goes down
to 46 million per year as opposed to 70.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I was told there'd be no math, and now
Yes,
look what I'm stuck in.
This is the most complicated contract in probably professional sports history, within the confines of a given league's collective bargaining agreement. I know that NFL contracts can get very funky with what is and isn't guaranteed and how and why and how that affects the cap. But yeah, like you said, this is entirely unprecedented in baseball. And I think the big question going forward is, will this become more of a precedent? I personally doubt it, at least to this extent. I think that, again, Ohtani having incredibly unique to him outside of baseball income streams make it much more doable for him than it is for Juan Soto, who I'm sure gets endorsement money, and I'm sure not $50 million a year.
Right, but I guess where I kind of go with this now is I think about the other free agents that are out there. And again, obviously you'd like to have a big chunk of money every year. But if I'm an athlete, that, you never know what's going to happen in your post-playing career. Opportunities are going to dry up. That just happens naturally. Hell, I go to autograph shows all the time and see guys that made some pretty good chunk of change out there signing, try to make a couple extra bucks. I guess if I'm a guy like, say, Cody Bellinger, and I stand to make, let's put it at 150, right? I could just say, well, give me half of it now and then defer half of it. And I can see stuff like, 70 million to live off of, I think should be pretty okay. And then to have a solid source of income, talking about 10 years down the road, that doesn't seem like it'd be a bad idea for most players. I mean, we all kind of joked about Bobby Bonilla Day, but this is this is making me rethink how front offices are going to approach, again, not 98% of a contract like Shohei, but you could easily take a look and offer somebody, you could say, well, half or 60% of 100 million. I mean, that's still doable.
Yeah. So I think there's two things that players and their representatives will have to consider going forward. One of them is just, the income stream that the player needs during the life of their contract. And I would say for anyone making $20+ million a year, deferring half of that should be no problem to live off of. But the other thing, and the more important thing to consider, is then back to the present value. What is the contract worth in dollars at the time it's being signed? So let's flip the Ohtani deal around. If I said at the beginning of the offseason, he's going to get 10 years, $460 million. That's it. No strings attached, no deferrals. I think most people would have said that feels about right. Maybe a little light, but in the ballpark. 46 million a year, 10 years. That's what his contract is worth in 2023 dollars. It is a $700 million contract, but the reason why this complicated math is done and the CBT is recalculated is to express what the contract is worth. So for someone like Cody Bellinger, I think him getting $150 million with no deferrals feels roughly in the range of correct, probably the low end of what people are expecting him to get vaguely. You then defer half of that and it goes down to, let's say that's 115 million. Well, then Scott Boras has to say, well, I can just go get him 150 million actual dollars without deferrals somewhere else. So that's what you have to consider, because then it does really open up the whole Pandora's box of, oh, we can actually end up paying a guy less than contracts that people thought that they would get, and we can just get them to agree to defer. And players and agents will not want that.
Right. Now, when you're talking about CBT, I just want our listeners to know that means the competitive balance tax. So we're using a lot of acronyms. The CBT is the competitive balance tax. That's the luxury tax that we talk about, that threshold. And I think it's 237 million this year. Is that right?
I think it went up to, the lowest one is 243 now, I believe.
243. And the CBA is the bargaining agreement, the collective bargaining agreement between MLB and the players union.
Yes.
And so as we're kind of looking at this right here, I mean, everybody knew that this was something that could potentially be done. Like you said, maybe not to the extent, but we're talking about Article 16, deferred compensation. This is from the collective bargaining agreement. There shall be no limitation on either the amount of deferred compensation or the percentage of total compensation attributable to deferred compensation for which a uniform player's contract may provide. Now, as we're looking at this right now, and the Sox are talking, or the Dodgers are talking about getting, say, Yamamoto and Tyler Glass now, and put that together with Mookie Betts, Freddie Freeman, and Shohei. I mean, who has a chance, I guess, is something that you think about. And when I think about this, I also think about, say, maybe some of the smaller market owners, smaller market teams. We have the White Sox on the south side of town. Like Jerry Reinsdorf can't be happy about this, can he?
He can't, but here's the thing. So Reinsdorf is 87. Other owners have made pretty clear plans or, off-ramp plans for leaving their organization, selling their organization. Deferrals get transferred to new ownership. It probably pretty directly lowers the amount that you can get by selling the team by maybe the exact amount of the deferral, but at least you're passing the payment on to somebody else. I think this potentially gives teams an opportunity to be a little bit more creative and say, well, I'll defer a large chunk of this contract to when I'm between the ages of 105 and 115, and it won't matter to me. Does that mean that Jerry Reinsdorf will suddenly start giving out 100, 150, $200 million contracts? No, but that is something that I think we have to consider as a broader possibility on a obviously much lower level and a much lesser scale than Ohtani's deferrals are.
So what do you think the chances are the next collective bargaining agreement, when this one expires? I mean, this is the tough thing now, is that if the owners accepted it before and the players wanted this, well, then the players aren't going to give it up without the owners giving something up. How much do you think this is going to be an issue at the next collective bargaining agreement?
So what's good is that we have a few more years left of this collective bargaining agreement. We have 3 more years. So that's 2 more off seasons before the off season in which this all gets negotiated again. Even though it feels like the lockout was yesterday, to see, okay, let's see how commonplace this becomes. Let's see what Juan Soto's deal looks like. Let's see what other, huge contracts look like. If other big contracts are just pretty straight up or on a sort of Max Scherzer level where a third of it was deferred, I don't think owners are really going to raise much of an issue. Now, if it's every big contract is getting so much of their value deferred, which is a twofold effect on small market teams, because one, like I suggested, that's not going to start small market teams from handing out $200 million contracts, no matter how long they're deferred for. And that benefits the big market teams who can't afford it even more because it lowers their tax hit. So I think it's a wait and see. I think that if it becomes commonplace as a way, I wouldn't call it a loophole because it's very explicitly written, but as a way to pretty easily lower a tax hit. And if we start see teams using it all the time and very few teams paying the luxury tax, because the tax then gets redistributed to non-luxury taxpayers, similar to revenue sharing, well, then those owners who are a majority who don't pay the luxury tax are probably going to be annoyed that their pool of money just got a lot smaller, and that these teams who might draw a harder line of going up to the luxury tax line suddenly can make much better, more expensive in undepreciated dollars before you do the recalculation teams. And that could lead to some competitive imbalance. But knowing that Ohtani had an unprecedented free agency with an unprecedented career path, with an unprecedented access to outside of baseball income, I think we just have to wait and see ultimately.
Oh my God, John, I can't believe this Pandora's box had just opened up, man. This is just, to me, like I said, I have a Ryan Sandberg signed Sports Illustrated cover where he was making $7 million a year. And now like I said, you need an advanced degree in mathematics to just put this all together. And like I said, cheers on Ohtani. He really does want to be on a winning team. And to me, if you're a Bryce Harper or you're a Juan Soto or you're a guy that's going to make a ton of money, that just makes all the sense in the world so that you could actually play for a winning team. Nobody wants to be, Mike Trout on the Angels for his whole career, kind of just doing nothing.
Right. I think, when you're Ohtani, and Farhan Zaidi of the Giants said yesterday that Ohtani's reps came back with the same offer, and Farhan said, okay, we're willing to do it. And it was just left up to Ohtani, and he, of course, picked the Dodgers. When you're in a position to basically dictate what your contract is going to look like or where you want to play, and you can sort of exercise all the leverage you want to play for the Dodgers, you get to have it both ways. He got that, 24 to 36 hours of, wow, it's $700 million, gets to play for the team he probably wanted to play for all along, and still has a record, even after you adjust downward with that 4.43%. He still has the AAV, average annual value record. He still has the total contract record, even if he's the 460. So, I mean, yeah, he gets to basically win in every regard. He gets to play where he wanted for the biggest offer and keep the Dodgers somehow below the tax line. It was the story for years had been, and we saw it a lot last offseason with basically how little the Dodgers did in terms of signing free agents. I think they had signed, including this offseason, including like up to Joe Kelly and Jason Hayward. I believe they had signed 10 or 12 consecutive one-year contracts up until Ohtani. They had spent off seasons planning to go maybe duck under the tax line the year before, go all out for Ohtani. And now it turns out probably, they probably will go over the tax line anyway. They're in talks for Glasnow. They're in talks for Yamamoto, but they probably can get to a point where they won't even get over that third tax line where their first draft pick goes back 10 spots. So they're just in an unbelievably enviable position. And as usual, they have a very good farm system that they can just keep graduating through or keep using in trade.
Well, John, I'm going to go cry in a beer, but before you leave, do me a favor and tell our listeners where they can find your work and where they can find you on the socials.
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter at Jon Becker _. If you go to FanGraphs on Roster Resource and click on any of the payroll pages, that's all me. If you have any questions about that, I'm pretty easily accessible on Twitter as well. And I do occasionally do some articles for FanGraphs, like the very complicated math and acronym heavy article on the Ohtani deal. And I'm sure there will be more to be written about this offseason about payrolls as more money gets spent and more disparity seems to find itself in play like it does every year.
Well, I appreciate you jumping on and trying to make some sense for it. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me.
This is Season 2, Episode 96 of the Fly the W670 podcast, the return of Sammy Sosa. Don't forget, listen, download, review, most importantly, subscribe to the Fly the W podcast. All right, Crawly, while we all sit and wait, there is a little bit of news. There are always rumors, and there are events happening at Wrigley Field.
Yeah, if we take a look at the hot stove right now, we'll put our board back up. Yamamoto and Sneller's still available for free agent signings. Cease and Alonso, nothing. Montgomery, Chapman, Bellinger, still all available. Same with Burns, Bregman, Glasnow could be traded. Hoskins, Soler, Imanaga available. And then Bieber, Kim, and Paredes. I haven't heard Paredes or Kim very much lately, but I have heard some Shane Bieber stuff. But, Dustin, as we're kind of looking at this right now, the Cubs did make a signing. No, not any of those big names, but for a backup catcher. The Cubs signed free agent catcher Jorge Alfaro to a minor league contract that includes a spring training invite, according to Robert Murray of Fansided. That's going to sell some tickets, right, Dustin?
I'm as soon as we're done, I'm going to go to the internet and try to buy me a pair.
Get some season tickets, buddy, but it may not seem like much, but honestly, it's a good insurance policy with Jan another year older and Miguel Amaya having his injury history. Offensively, Alfaro has pop in his bat. He hits home runs, but he has poor plate discipline, which leads to a lot of strikeouts. Defensively, phenomenal arm, but behind the plate, he's one of the worst catchers when it comes to blocking pitches. So, you never want to have that, that third catcher have to come up. So again, just a little insurance policy to have some depth in the minor leagues in case some of the younger guys like Pablo Aliendo are not ready. Now, Dustin, we talked about that Chicago had both comeback player of the years this year in Cody Bellinger, but Scott Merkin of MLB.com reports that the Cubs may be interested in former White Sox closer Liam Hendriks, who also won the comeback player of the year.
Yeah, I found that very interesting.
Now, Hendriks came back from Hodgkin's lymphoma last season, but shortly after returning to the White Sox, he suffered an elbow injury that required Tommy John surgery in August. He obviously would not be able to break with the team when they leave spring training, but it's possible he could come back at the end of the season and give the bullpen a little bit of boost if all goes well with his rehab. This is what Hendriks had to say about the Cubs reaching out. There's been nothing substantial about any of the conversations we've had, but they were one of the teams that reached out pretty early on. It seems like obviously we are in no rush. My timeline hasn't changed. I'm not going to be ready in April. Teams are making sure they got their main part of their 2024 set up. We've had some clubs call and be like, once it heals up, let us know. Dustin, I know you're a big fan of Liam Hendriks, the person. I think we all are. And so, it might not be a bad deal to kind of just sign him.
Not at all. Listen, the Cubs like to have good people around, and he is good people. Bottom line, right? The Cubs like to have good people around. He is good people. He's done a lot of good work in a short amount of time being here in Chicago off the field. So you could have a lot more people like Liam Hendriks around.
Right. And we saw, the bullpen struggle last year. So, I mean, you never can have too many good bullpen arms. That's the way I would put it. But there was, Dustin, one big free agent signing that may affect the Cubs. Korean star Jung-Hoo Lee signed a 6-year, $113 million deal with the San Francisco Giants. Finally, they got somebody. Lee was regarded
somebody would take their money eventually. I knew it. I knew it.
Lee was regarded as one of the best players in South Korea's KBO league, spending the past 7 seasons with the Kilwoom Heroes. He was a KBO MVP. In his time with the Heroes, he hit a whopping 340 average, 65 home runs, 69 stolen bases, and more walks than strikeouts. So why should Cub fans care? Well, that takes another potential suitor off the board for Cody Bellinger. So when you talked about people that were interested in Cody Bellinger, the main names that you kept hearing was, the Giants, the Cubs, and Toronto. So one less suitor, I think, kind of looks good for the, possible reunion between the Cubs and Toronto, wouldn't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. You're taking it off the board. Yes.
It started out, you had the Yankees and they got Juan Soto, and now the Dodgers or the Giants got Lee. So I think that as it keeps happening, I think more and more it just makes sense. It's just got to be a matter of dollars and cents. If it's a reasonable contract, the Cubs have money, or maybe defer some of it, take a page out of LA's book.
There you go. That's an option. While we were getting ready to do this and we're talking about Yamamoto, I read that Yamamoto also visiting with the Phillies today.
Ooh. Well, Dustin,
they haven't spent enough money already.
Right. There's 3 main free agents from Japan that have been dominating the offseason, and we have some Cub notes on each of them. Apparently, Dustin, according to Tom Verducci, Shohei Ohtani never considered signing with the Cubs. So I think that the Cubs were serious, and I think they were willing to make an offer, but it seems to me like he never wanted to leave the West Coast.
It was almost like he was interviewing the teams he was interested in, as opposed to you being a team having the opportunity to interview and sign the player.
And when you talk about the different agents, the more teams are involved, the more you can drive up the price.
Right.
But I have a feeling that he did not. I mean, when you think about some of the finalists, I heard that exact same deal that he got with the Dodgers was also offered up to San Francisco, the Giants.
Right. Well, their camp. I mean, that's what I mean.
Right.
His team, his group offered this to certain teams that they were willing to actually go to.
Right.
And then they picked.
And the fact that the Angels were even in the running, considering how bad they are, just tells you something. So,
well, that's what shows where the comfortability and the routine and stuff was a part of it.
Right. Now, the second player, this infuriated me, Dustin. You know my guy, the guy that I want, Japanese pitcher Yoshinobu Yamamoto.
Yeah, we just talked about, right? Yeah.
Ken Rosenthal in The Athletic wrote about the Yamamoto sweepstakes currently going on. You mentioned Phillies. How about having to met with Mookie Betts, Freddie Freeman, and Shohei Ohtani?
Yeah, and by the way, Shohei Ohtani, right? Yeah, and by the way, right.
But here's what Rosenthal writes in The Athletic. The first year price for Yamamoto could exceed $75 million, depending on how the contract's structured. So you're looking on average annual value, AAV, of about $30 million or higher. And then Ken writes, only a few teams can play at that financial level, and virtually all of them, the Dodgers, Mets, Yankees, Giants, and Red Sox, are in the mix for a pitcher who won 3 straight versions of the Japanese Cy Young and 3 straight Pacific League MVPs. Dustin, am I missing something here? Did Ken forget a team? I don't know.
Well, I mean, he's got to be talking to somebody, and the somebody is usually the agents, right? Or he's talking to general managers. Are the Cubs not interested because of that price? I mean, that's a lot of money, Crawly, for somebody that's never thrown a pitch in Major League Baseball.
Dustin, I get what you're saying.
I'm just trying to answer your question. I'm not saying I agree with it, Crawly. I don't. I'm with you. I would be very happy at this point with a Yamamoto Bellinger offseason. That would be great. I could be totally on board with that. But there's got to be a reason. Something's up. There's something up that the Cubs aren't on anybody's list.
I just wonder if Jed is just risk averse to some of those type of contracts. And if he is, that's a problem, because if anyone ever played poker before, right? If you just keep waiting to get the perfect hand,
right, eventually
you're going to lose your money. I mean, it's just going to get chipped away. You have to sometimes push in your chips. And if the Dodgers are doing this, look at what the Dodgers have done, Dustin, since 2016. Look at what they've done. And yeah, they won 1 cheap World Series, but we've said it over and over again that the postseason's a crapshoot, but they have been a consistently great team. They literally have won the NL West every season since 2016. And the one time they didn't, one time San Francisco beat them as far as winning the division, but Dodgers still won 105 games. So I think they know what they're doing. I don't understand if the Cubs have money. And Dustin, all I can tell you is, you know how often I'm at the park. You know how many $14 beers I'm drinking. And now this is a year-round venture. Go down to Winterland at Wrigley and see how many people are throwing money around. Yep. How the heck are we not considered, in Ken Rosenthal's viewpoint, one of the teams that can play at this financial level?
Well, why are we not mentioned? I'd love to have somebody ask Kenny that, but he forgets about his old friends, Kenny Rosenthal. I've known Ken for a long, long time, worked with him for years with the Sporting News. When I got to the Score, I brought him into the Score. And, sometimes when you stop paying people to come on, they all of a sudden say, lose my number. There's no, for old time's sake or anything like that. So we'll see. I mean, I'd love somebody that has access to Kenny Rosenthal to ask him that, because that's a very good question, Crawly.
Finally, John Morosi mentioned that the Cubs are in the running for pitcher Shota Imanaga, along with the Dodgers, Mets, and the Red Sox. So I don't even know who the Dodgers and Mets are not in on, but at least the Cubs are mentioned in this one for Shota Imanaga, but he's not going to cost the big dollars that Yamamoto is going to. So at least there's that. So we'll see what happens. A few more free agent signings of note. The Pirates have signed first baseman Rowdy Tellez, who was with the Brewers, so he stays in the NL Central. he's one of those guys that always seems to hit well against the Cubs. The Royals have signed right-handed pitcher Chris Stratton to a 1-year, $3.5 million contract. And they also signed Seth Lugo to a 3-year, $45 million contract. So, good for you, Seth Lugo.
Yeah, good for Seth Lugo, right? I mean, no problem with that. Fine. That's good.
Now, Dustin, I am excited. I'm going to tell you why. Some exciting news for those of us who
I knew you would like this. I saw this. Funny, Crawly, is I saw this story and I thought of you. Honestly, I saw this story and I thought of Crawly.
So excited for all of you who love spring training and all of you that love prospects. MLB announced Spring Breakout 2024. All 30 MLB clubs will assemble rosters filled with 20 to 25 of their best prospects to take on top minor league or rookie talents from other organizations. Each team will play one 7-inning exhibition game. So I open up the app and I take a look. For Cub fans, the Cubs' top prospect team will play the White Sox top prospect team on Friday, March 15th, right in the middle of my trip to Mesa. Boom.
There you go. Boom. You don't even have to beg the wife to stay out there longer, go for trip number 2. It's all lined up. Good for you.
It is all lined up for me. So those of you who remember last year I was out in spring training, I'll have plenty to report on in that game. To me, Dustin, the reason you go to spring training is to kind of see the prospects and the young guys. Like I'm going to see all the other guys when I start going to, the regular season games. I want to see the future, and to be able to see two teams with their stacked talent, I think is going to be really interesting. And there's going to be bragging rights, right?
Oh yeah. I love the bragging rights part of it. Yeah. That's a good concept. I like that concept.
Very fun. We wanted to wish happy 81st birthday to the greatest pitcher in Cubs history, Fergie Jenkins. And Dustin, finally, it's here. Cubs caroling this Saturday. We made up at 5 p.m. at Output Lounge at 3730 North Clark Avenue. 5 p.m. That's right next to the Metro, across the street from Wrigley Field Dogs. What's going to happen is we're going to have our meet and greet at 5 o'clock. At 5:30, we will pass out the hymnals and we will warm up and learn the songs. It's pretty easy.
I love the hymnals. I love the hymnal.
The hymnals are great. We're still tweaking even up to the last minute. And at 6 p.m., we step foot out of Output and begin the caroling bar crawl. We have at least 13 stops. So, we'll probably do a beer in every other stop. I don't know if we'll do all 13. Some of us will.
You won't be, you'll be using that hymnlet for something else if you hit it all 13.
We'll see. And we finish over at the oldest bar in Wrigley, Nisei Lounge, where we will be finishing up with the original candy cane infused Malort.
Yeah, a lot of controversy about that, huh? Like a lawsuit going on or something. I mean,
we'll see what happens. Maybe we'll have the guys from Nisei on to talk about it.
Yes, let's do that. Yeah.
I will tell you this is that it is really, truly a fun event. Even if you're not a drinker, we have people that come and don't drink one drop. We have people that can sing like angels and other people that sing like me. It's going to be just a lot of fun. It's Danny
Will there
Rocket.
Be some video of this on your Twitter?
I will definitely have some video going, and hopefully we're just all going to have a lot of fun. And we've gone viral before. Maybe we'll go viral again. But I would say that if you're just looking for something to do this Saturday, 5 p.m. at Output Lounge at 3730 North Clark Street. And who knows, maybe Danny Rocket has a Fly the W song for us.
And you said that Output's the best wings in the city, huh?
Best wings. Oh my God, delicious. Boned in that's the only way you're ever going to do wings, but the boned in.
Otherwise it's a chicken nugget with sauce, right?
Right. Absolutely. It's so good. And they do have cold Club 400 beer there that you can get. So absolutely come out, man, and have some fun and listen to some songs and meet some Cub fans.
Well, Crawly, that's a wrap. Have a wonderful time caroling. You've been listening to Season 2, Episode 96, the return of Sammy Sosa. Don't forget, listen, download, review, subscribe to the Fly the W podcast. Hope everybody's having a great holiday season. Crawly and I will be back early next week for a couple more editions. And who knows, maybe we'll have an emergency podcast.
Well, all we can do is wait. And while we're doing that, we're going to have fun and we're going to continue talking Cubs. Keep your, again, patience, Cub fans. Let's preach it. Go Cubs! Hey guys, it's Crawly. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. If you want to see more of our videos, be sure to check out our playlist and let us know what you think in the comments below. Also, don't forget to follow us on social media to stay up to date with our latest episodes. Links are in the description. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. Go Cubs!